In 2019, a team of 18 soldiers from the Indian Army's mountaineering expedition set out on a 2-month commemorative trek. Their mission: to summit Mount Makalu, the 5th highest peak in the world. They had departed Delhi a month earlier, and while resting at a waypoint called Long Malakarka to acclimatize before continuing to the base camp, they stumbled across something completely unexpected near their campsite, something that sent chills down their spines. Colder than even the freezing winds could manage. Footprints. Massive footprints in the snow. The question remains unanswered even today. Were these footprints new evidence of a creature, one that has eluded mankind for centuries? This is the story of the Indian Army and the Yeti. Yeti encounters. The 2019 Indian Army expedition to Mount Makalu began on March 27th, departing from Delhi. Similar missions had been carried out by the Army for decades, each one not just a test of endurance, but a symbolic tribute to the nation's long fight for freedom, a struggle that lasted nearly 200 years under British rule before ending in 1947. But independence came with division. India and Pakistan were suddenly torn apart, and with it came mass migrations, violence, and decades of bloodshed. Even today, territorial conflicts between India and Pakistan continue. A fragile ceasefire has held since 2003, but it's been broken many times. With constant threats of terrorism and unrest, the Indian Army must always remain on edge. Their mountaineering teams are among the most highly trained, prepared for high-altitude warfare, but also driven by a deep tradition of adventure and discipline. Each expedition strengthens their unity, builds their spirit, and passes down a legacy to the next generation. The 2019 spring expedition was led by Major Manoj Joshi. It included 4 officers, 2 junior commissioned officers, and 11 other soldiers. On April 2nd, after reaching the Himalayan foothills, the team began their trek toward Makalu Base Camp. By April 9th, they had reached 4,500 meters, pausing at Long Malakarka to acclimate their bodies to the thin air. And it was here, while exploring the area around their camp, they found something startling. Huge, mysterious footprints, stamped deep into the hardened snow. Using their equipment, they measured the largest print. 32 inches long, 15 inches wide. That's more than 3 times the size of an average man's foot. And then came something even more unsettling. The tracks appeared in a straight line, almost as if the creature that left them walked upright, stride after stride, some as long as 4 feet apart. By comparison, an average human stride is barely half that. Whatever made these tracks was massive. This was the first time footprints in such numbers were ever reported by an Indian Army expedition. And yet, maybe not so surprising. For nearly 2 centuries, strange findings tied to the Yeti have often been linked to soldiers and explorers of this region. In fact, many of the earliest accounts came from British servicemen who, after their military careers, devoted themselves to Himalayan exploration, some even leading the first expeditions to Everest. The Makalubaran National Park, where the 2019 team was trekking, has long been home to such reports. Massive prints, and even rare, unverified claims of the Yeti itself whispered by locals and explorers alike. Skeptics argue the tracks are nothing more than bears, Himalayan brown or black bears whose fur and remains are often mistaken for Yeti evidence. Most samples collected over the years, hair, skin, bones, have ultimately been proven to belong to local animals, bears or goats. But there's a problem with that explanation. Bears walk on all 4s with a heavy, lumbering gait. Their tracks are easily identified, broad, flat, with the distinct marks of claws. The footprints the Indian Army found didn't match. At least some of the men believed these tracks belonged to something else. And these were not inexperienced hikers. These were trained soldiers, familiar with every type of wildlife in the region. So whether or not they believed in the folklore of the Yeti, one thing was certain: to find such enormous, unexplainable footprints, so close to where they were about to sleep that night, it could not have been a comforting thought as they closed their eyes in the frozen silence of the Himalayas. Despite modern skepticism, there was a time when the Western world was completely fascinated by stories of the Yeti. Fascinated to such an extent that the American Department of State once issued official guidance about this elusive creature directly to the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi, India. A dispatch dated November 30th, 1959, laid out 3 specific regulations. 1. A royalty of 5,000 rupees had to be paid to His Majesty's Government of Nepal for a permit to search for the Yeti. 2. In the event that the Yeti was found, it could be photographed or even captured alive, but it must not be killed, unless in an unavoidable case of self-defense. Any photographs, or the creature itself if caught alive or dead, must be handed over to the government of Nepal immediately. And 3. Any reports shedding light on its existence had to be submitted to the Nepalese government as soon as possible, and could not be released to the press without official approval. Fast forward to 2019. Hoping to be taken seriously by the same world media, the Indian Army shared evidence of strange footprints to their official Twitter account. Their intention was to spark curiosity, maybe even provoke a proper scientific investigation. But, as expected, much of the world responded with laughter and mockery. Still, the question remains, is there some real credibility behind the existence of this creature? Yes, there is. For as long as Europeans have ventured into Tibet and the vast Himalayan region, locals have repeated their legends of a huge ape-like being. The earliest known account dates back almost 2 centuries. In 1832, B.H. Hodgson, the British resident at the court of Nepal, reported that local hunters were terrified by a wild man covered in dark hair. More than 50 years later, in 1889, Scottish explorer and Indian Army Surgeon Major Lawrence Waddell was climbing the Himalayas near Sikkim at an elevation of 17,000 feet, when he too came across enormous footprints in the snow. His guides insisted these belonged to the Yeti, a ferocious creature they warned him about, one capable of attacking humans, even carrying them away for food. They told him the only way to escape was to run downhill, because the Yeti's long hair would fall into its eyes and blind it while descending. It was through accounts like Waddell's that the Western world first came to know this creature as the Yeti. But across Asia, it has many names: meat or man-bear, almas in Russia and Mongolia, meaning wild people, or methikangmi, which translates to the filthy snowman. And far from being limited to the Indian-Nepalese border where those 2019 tracks were found, stories of the Yeti stretch across nearly all the great mountain ranges of Asia. From the Caucasus in the west, to the Himalayas in the south, from the Pamirs near Afghanistan, to the far eastern tip of Russia, some 4,500 miles away. So while skepticism grows in the Western world, locals who have lived in these regions for generations remain unmoved. They don't need the approval of outsiders who've never set foot on their mountains. And indeed, around the globe, there are many accounts of creatures strikingly similar to the Yeti. The rock apes of Southeast Asia, the mapinguari of South America, and of course Sasquatch or Bigfoot of North America. For the people who live with these legends, disbelief doesn't erase their truth. They don't need mountains of evidence. For them, the truth is simple. The evidence is hidden in the mountains. These legends may stretch back centuries, perhaps even thousands of years before Europeans ever heard of them. But for Western society, the story of the Yeti is barely a century old. The legend of the Abominable Snowman reached global attention in 1921, when members of the British Mount Everest reconnaissance expedition claimed they saw it. And prisoners of war continued to surface sightings of the creature the locals called almas. In his book The Long Walk, a man who escaped from a Siberian labor camp even described being delayed by a pair of them. Other accounts tell of Chinese soldiers leaving out food for the almas and watching them eat. In 1948, Russian geologist M.A. Stonin reported seeing one himself in the Tian Shan Mountains. Awakened one morning by cries that the horses were being stolen, he grabbed his rifle and rushed outside. There, standing among the animals, was a figure covered head to toe in long red hair. Stonin shouted, and the creature bolted. He gave chase, but as it ran, he couldn't bring himself to fire. It was simply too human-like. Stories like these kept flowing out of Asia, always shadowed by doubt, and always easy to dismiss as fantasy, lies, or mistaken identity. But not every piece of evidence could be explained away as bear tracks. After World War II, Western media interest flared again, thanks to the testimony of a man considered highly credible, a leading member of a scientific expedition, with no reason to exaggerate. His claims were supported by teammates, including a respected surgeon, and his photographs were undeniable, bizarre, and compelling. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around for the credits. This is one of those stories where, the deeper I go into the research, the harder it becomes to dismiss the possibility of this creature's existence. Be sure to look out for Part 2, where we'll uncover even more eyewitness testimony and documented evidence. We'll also look at the hoaxes that clouded the Yeti story and gave skeptics even more reason to laugh at what the Indian Army discovered in 2019. Hopefully, these stories help salvage some of their reputation, because many respected explorers before them truly believed in the Yeti. And from my own experiences working overseas with foreign militaries, I can tell you, these soldiers are among the toughest and most disciplined in the world. They would never tarnish their honor by fabricating a tale. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons and channel members. Your support allows me to create these episodes faster, without losing the quality you've come to expect. Whatever you're going through right now, may God be with you through it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.